Hey guys, so today I have my January wrap up, which was actually a pretty decent reading month, and I met my goals kind of for rereading books and then also finishing books in a series. So I actually hit a lot of marks for those. So I'm pretty happy that I was able to do that in the month of January because I really failed in the month of December. But anyways, let's just get on into what I read in January. So to start off in January, I finished the final book in the Dark Artifice series by Cassandra Clare, which is Queen of Air and Darkness. This is the third and final book in that part of the series, I guess, but it's definitely left open that there will be more of a continuation factor in later series that has to do with what happened in this series. Honestly, I think it was pretty good. I gave it 4 stars. I found myself just highly entertained the whole time while I was reading this book, and it is a very long book, so keeping me entertained the whole time was a pretty impressive feat because it is 900 and something pages. But Cassandra Clare, just with this series, has developed so many characters and so many different storylines with each of those individual characters, so you're always just finding another interesting character to read about. I did have some problems with the book. I don't want to give specific spoilery details, so I will try to avoid doing so, but if you read this book, you'll probably know what I mean when I say this book took, I think it was around 200 pages. This whole chunk of this book really was just completely unrelated to anything that was happening in this book, and I can see how that's going to tie in later with the series, but I felt like it didn't really have a place here in this final book. We already had so much that we wanted to figure out and get solutions for and answers for in this book, and then there's this random like side thing that happens for a really long time that I just do not think was necessary. Overall, okay, but when I was reading this final book, and more like when I finished this final book, I just had the feeling that I kind of have moved on from Cassandra Clare books and being all hyped for them. I'd kind of felt this way with Lord of Shadows, which is the book before this book, and it's just more so confirmed in Queen of Air and Darkness. Like, yes, I had fun reading it, and I think I'll still read some of her books in the future. So in January, I also ended up finishing The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I started this in November, and then I put it on hold for the month of December. So I finished the final 200 pages that I hadn't yet finished in November in January, and overall I think this was just a really fantastic book. I think everything you hear about it being a wonderful atmospheric and magical read, like, it's 100% true. I felt like I could smell the circus and I could see the circus, and I was there, and there was just such a wonderful magical wonderland type aspect to the Night Circus. It's following this magical circus, and there's just some strange things going on. There's 2 players in a game, and we don't really know what the game is or what it means or how a winner is determined really until the end of the book, but you just are seeing the circus over the span of years, honestly, and how it affects those people who are within the circus, and then just about those who follow the circus and who love the circus, because the circus just kind of appears one day in a different city, and that's just kind of how this magical circus works. But honestly, it was really fantastic. I give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I just think it was really a beautifully done story. Really good for the fall and the winter months, definitely. Full Metal Alchemist update, because I think every month until I finish the series, I'm gonna have an update on what I've read in the month. So in January, I finished volume 3 from this bind up, and then I also read volumes 4, 5, and 6 from this. So yeah, I'm 2 books in. I think there's 9 of these bind up volumes. I think it's a total of 27 volumes. I'm not entirely sure. So I'm making okay progress with it, but Nathan just blew me away this month because he finished all of these, like all 27 volumes or whatever of this series, and he was non-stop reading them. I've never really seen that in him before, but like all he wanted to do was read, and he would just look forward to reading so much. It was so awesome. It was really, really cool to see. So I'm very excited to finish this series, and Nathan's putting the pressure on me because he really wants to watch the anime now, and I still have quite a ways to go with finishing this series. So I will finish it. I mean, I for sure will finish it within the next few months, but I don't know if he's gonna let me wait that long. We'll have to find out. Another book I had mentioned I wanted to read at the end of the year, I got to finishing Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is the 2nd book in the duology for the Six of Crows duology, and I read Six of Crows in 2017. Yep, the beginning of 2017, and 2 years later, I finally finished the 2nd book, but Truly, this book was incredible. I give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I honestly think I enjoyed this book even more than the first book. I can't really give too much of a synopsis for this if you haven't yet read Six of Crows, but this follows a varied cast of characters who live in this city, and they're kind of trying to pull off a heist situation. They're thieves, and they're just a really fun group of people, and this book pretty much picks up immediately where Six of Crows leaves off in the ending, and so you're just starting right there and you jump right into it. And that's something that I really liked Crooked Kingdom more for, because I really couldn't get into the first book, Six of Crows, for a while. I think I was 150 or so pages in and I was still just not really feeling it and not super engaged and super in love with what was happening. But this book, because there's already that basis of the characters and you just jump right in, and I was hooked honestly from the start. I mean, I read the first 160 pages like in a day, and then I think the next time I sat down to read it, I finished the whole thing. So I really just couldn't get over this book. It was really, really good. So if you're like me and you never got around to finishing the second book in this duology, please read it, because like I liked it even more than the first one, and I wasn't really expecting that, so it was a very pleasant surprise. But I love the characters in this so much, and it's going to be a Netflix series. At least that's what the rumor is. I think it's for this book, or is it for Shadow and Bone, or is it for both? I'm not sure. Either way, now that I've actually finished it, I can watch that series once it does come out. All right, so now one book that I reread was The Last Song by Nicholas Sparks. So I had read The Last Song back in college, I think, and at the time when I read it, I became obsessed with it. Like, it was just one of those books that I read and thought it was the greatest thing that had ever happened. This is a story of a girl named Ronnie. It's her summer after she's just graduated from high school, and she has been estranged from her father for the past few years. She lived with her mother and her younger brother in New York City. And so this summer, her mother sends her brother and her to see her dad, who lives on a beach in North Carolina. And so she's kind of trying to reconnect with him over the summer, but she really has issues with him. And so she totally butts heads with him most of the time in the story. But through it all, you see how patient and loving her dad is, and they do start to kind of get to know each other. And you also get to see her little brother's relationship with his father, and she falls in love, because it's a Nicholas Sparks book, with one of the locals there. I really liked this again on the reread. The thing is though, it's not as amazing as I remembered it being, as I'd still give it like a solid 4 stars. Maybe that's a little too high, but I just feel bad giving it anything less than that, because I really loved this book the first time I read it. But first, a couple things I want to mention that I really loved about it. First of all was the setting. The setting is a beach in North Carolina, and honestly, it's January right now, and I'm not much of a beach person. Like, I like the beach, okay, but I'd much rather be in the mountains or anything like that. That's more my thing. But this book made me want to go to a beach house in North Carolina in the summertime so badly. So I think he really does a great job with writing this setting, and I think pretty much all of his books kind of take place in a similar kind of setting, because that's where he's from and he lives, and so I think he really writes that so well. The romance though, honestly, I don't know why I thought it was so amazing. I mean, it's pretty basic of a romance, if I'm being completely honest. And one thing, which I really hope this isn't a spoiler, something I didn't like about the way that Nicholas Sparks chose to write their love story was that there was all of the buildup, hey Leia, for them getting together. But then once they were together, honestly, it was like, and then 6 weeks later, blah, blah, blah. So I feel like I didn't get to see as much of their relationship as I felt like I should have seen, because you had all this buildup and then like they're finally together, and then like it's the next chapter, it's like the past 6 weeks together had been like a dream, and it's just like, but why didn't I get to read that? Like, that's what I'm kind of was looking forward to, and we just skipped over like all of that. So anyways, that's just a critique I had personally when reading this book, especially the second time around, but I still thought it was really good. But it's not my favorite Nicholas Sparks book anymore, which I really thought this was my favorite for so long. Kind of a bummer though when you reread a book and it's just, you know, not as amazing as you once thought it was. I don't like that. And the final book that I read in January was also a reread, and I reread Eragon with Vanessa, so we did a buddy read for this. And I'd been wanting to reread Eragon honestly for years now, because Eragon was one of those series that I read in 8th grade. If you've never heard of it or read it, Eragon is about a guy named Eragon, and he lives in this really small village on the outskirts of this empire. He just gets by hunting and taking care of the farm with his uncle and his cousin, and life is just what it is until one day he discovers a dragon egg. And that's kind of where the story takes off. It takes him away from this small town. He gets thrown into this whole empire, learning about the king who rules this empire, how there once used to be dragons and dragon riders and elves and magical creatures, and how it was all kind of banished because of the king. And you find out that Eragon kind of turns into a very key political figure in this whole new world, and he gets thrust into the politics of it all. And that doesn't really necessarily happen in the first book. You're just more like Eragon's figuring everything out, figuring out how this world works, what it means to have a dragon. I think this book is very well paced. We were reading it in like, I think 4 sections total was how we read it, but every time there was so much had happened in each of those sections. I feel like that it was just like, wow, like a lot really happened in the span of this novel. So I think it was just really fun and fast paced. But on the reread, I did notice the writing wasn't necessarily the best. A little bit more simplistic than what I normally read. Alongside, I was reading Crooked Kingdom too, and just the difference in those styles and just the flow of the writing and the narrative is just a lot more obvious in other books, where this did feel a little bit more like choppy. But really that's my only complaint. I mean, there were things that Eragon did that annoyed me, but I don't think that's out of line with the character of Eragon and just like the situation he's put in. Like, he was just a 16-year-old kid living his life, and then all this got thrown on him. So overall, I did enjoy rereading Eragon. It's definitely still a series that I would recommend, especially if you're like maybe a younger reader and you're trying to get into fantasy. Like, this was probably my first fantasy, more like high fantasy books that I'd read, and I just thought it was so good. So that wraps up my January wrap up. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading.